This is the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, a podcast brought to you by two physical therapists devoted to helping physical therapists and other healthcare providers become better educators to patients, students, the community, and each other by interviewing prominent and passionate people within the realms of healthcare and education. The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast is intended literally for educational and entertainment purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based on only one source, and therefore this podcast should not be used as personal medical advice. While care has been taken to ensure accuracy, occasionally mistakes and factual errors can be present, as we are only human. This is our journey on the road to becoming better educators, so get ready with your pen and paper as class is about to begin. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. And for this episode, we are actually going to be doing this one live from the Virginia Center for Spine and Sports Therapy here in Midlothian, Virginia. We're having a live episode featuring Dr. Erson Religioso at our clinic, where he is teaching the eclectic approach for the upper quarter and the lower quarter. So, Erson, thanks so much for coming on the show today. But was there anything that you'd like our audience to know about you?
Well, I think people sometimes forget that I have my own cash-based practice, and I am by no means a cash-based expert. I always refer to my colleagues, Aaron LeBauer and Jared Carter, for those things because they are the experts on that. They know the ins and outs of that. Then I just happen to be a cash-based practitioner. I still do patient care, but my main thing is my blog, content creation, and teaching, probably in that order. And I think those things have enabled me to do less patient care, but I never wanted to be one of those instructors that says, hey, you know what, 10 years ago I had this awesome case. I still want to have fresh stories. Mm-hmm. And I think it also keeps me fresh. You know, I never wanted to be one of those instructors that said, this is how you should treat patients, even though I don't treat patients anymore. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm also, Updoc Media is my media company. I am not on the face of that, but I am part of the Jedi Council. So I'm not a part of the Therapy Insiders podcast. I am one of the hosts, just like Untold Physio Stories. So I have two podcasts, and thanks for having me on your podcast, Brandon.
No, appreciate it. So I got to ask, now that we got into Star Wars route to start with, I guess of all the members of the Jedi Council, who do you feel like you are on the Updoc Media side? Like, are you Master Windu, or who do you think you are?
I probably identify the most with Master Windu, only because he has a unique lightsaber, the only one with a purple lightsaber, because he asked George Lucas, and George Lucas said yes. I also have a shaved head, and I like Samuel L. Jackson. I'm not loud like Samuel L. Jackson is, but I like Master Windu. I mean, I also like Master Yoda, of course, because he's Master Yoda. Of course. And he has the best quotes in terms of failure. He has the best failure quotes, and that really resonates with me because I fail a lot, but I learn from the failure. And I think that's what differentiates a good clinician from a bad clinician, or anyone who's successful in business and not successful in business, is we're not learning or adapting from their failures.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, especially, I'm only 2.5 years out of school, and I can already tell how much I've really learned from failing a lot. But just even being able to identify your mistakes. And of course, I'm still learning every day, and I have a long ways I have to go yet. But that's so true that, without struggle, sometimes without that failure, there won't be that push forward. So I think that's a really good point. So kind of getting into the topic today of kind of how you've kind of built up your brand. What made you decide to start Modern Manual Therapy? And do you think you can tell us kind of how that startup process went for you? Sure.
Well, a long time ago, when I was purely just into pathoanatomy and I was breaking up scar tissue left and right, and I don't teach any of that anymore. If you guys aren't familiar with that, that's just not possible. Anyway, that's not the topic of this podcast. You can listen to all my stuff for that. There was a local president of the chiropractic college. One of them, he ended up treating a relative of his, and he saw that we were doing a lot of manipulation, a lot of soft tissue work, and I was using these crude wood instruments that I had fashioned from another course. I had someone else copy them. One of my patients is a woodworker, and he's like, hey, you know what? Why don't you try these Grasson instruments? And I thought they were fascinating. I really liked how you could feel whatever I thought I was feeling at the time, adhesions or whatever. And again, I don't teach any of that stuff now, but when I heard the cost of them, I thought, wow, that's I didn't own my own practice then, and it was prohibitively expensive for someone who was only 3 years out, just like you. So I thought, you know what, I think I always kind of kept that in the back of my mind, and the internet there wasn't a lot of e-commerce out on the internet, but I kept on searching for cheaper alternatives. I found a cheaper alternative, and I thought I could improve on it like anyone else. So I kind of had a couple of crude metalworkers design what eventually became the Edge mobility tool, which is kind of like my number one product and what I base a lot of my courses and stuff on. So back then it was called the Foscillator. And when Evidence in Motion was going to start using it in some of their seminars, Tim Flynn came up, called me and said, hey, we can't have this thing called the Foscillator. We think you should really change the name of that. So I held a contest on Facebook and someone suggested the Edge mobility tool. And I thought, that's great. That didn't seem to be trademarked at the time, or it was an existing trademark, but it wasn't like for any particular product. Like it just kind of fell by the wayside. They never produced it. So the Edge mobility tool was born, and I started blogging initially because I wanted to sell it. And I wanted to, patients would always ask me, hey, can I buy this? And I'm like, no, I just want to sell this to clinicians. And one of the students who refined it for me on his computer, he actually ended up stealing the design and selling it under a different brand. Oh, yeah. And he wanted to sell me half of what he had mass produced. So, he designed it and basically just stole it. And he was just a PT student at the time. And, I was a manual therapy fellow and I had all this cred behind me, but he's the one who mass produced it. He brought it to the market first. That tool ended up being, one of my students came up to me one day after I was just kind of selling it on eBay and selling it at local courses. I had no means to teach outside of the 3 PT schools I was teaching in Buffalo locally. So I only had like a smattering of eBay sales. And one of my students said, hey, the X tool was just featured on Mike Reinold's blog. I'm like, who's Mike Reinold? He's like, oh, he's a PT on social media. I'm like, PTs are on social media? So I kind of researched that and I thought, well, I like to write. I can do this. So initially, the whole purpose of me developing what eventually became Modern Manual Therapy blog, which was back then themanualtherapist.com. And that's kind of like what I would say in many YouTube videos. Hey, it's Dr. E with themanualtherapist.com. That became my brand because I wanted just to get out there and promote the Edge tool. Because I knew that, being a stainless steel tool, having one product at the time, like once you buy a hammer from hammer.com, there's no reason for you to go back to hammer.com. Mm-hmm. You already know what to do with the hammer. The hammer lasts until you pretty much break the hammer, which is, you'd have to try pretty hard to break a hammer or a stainless steel tool, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted people to come back and thus promote and share. And again, social media was not really that big in terms of sharing on iPhones and Android. Share really is where it's all at now, and because like free promotion. So the thing with that is I just started doing less with the Edge, or only some with the Edge, and more with assessment and treatment. And I had taken so many different courses from so many different gurus and kind of amalgamated into my own approach, what eventually became branded as the eclectic approach. People started asking me to teach all around the world, and that's kind of how it happened. I mean, initially it was just to promote the Edge tool, and then I developed 2 different distinct brands out of it, the eclectic approach and Edge mobility system.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting story in terms of how that really all started, because that's not a unique path that I've really heard a ton. But, in general, in terms of someone's looking to kind of start up something like this, or something in general, they want to get themselves out there. What are some helpful systems, apps, or programs that you kind of use to help create your content that you think others could perhaps benefit from to kind of get their own thing going?
I think it's really easy to get out there just because people don't really care about quality. I mean, if you know who Tim Ferriss is, he says you don't need his setup for a podcast. You don't need the most expensive camera and mic. I would say, yeah, if you could use a mic, you're way better off using a mic. But I've only started using a mic regularly in all my videos for like the past couple years, and it is really hard to hear me in my first several years of videos. So all that stuff makes a difference. But I'm not going to just throw out brands or apps out there. I think like whatever comes with your average Windows or Mac, even a Chromebook. I do a lot of stuff in Google Chrome. Now that Chrome has Android apps, there's simple video editors, like whatever stock comes with it. You don't need Final Cut Pro. Mm-hmm. You can just use iMovie and do a good enough job. Just have good lighting, have good audio. I would say film and landscape. Enough with the portrait people, unless it's with stories. But the most important thing is what I would tell everyone who, they're all huge in social media now, like Dave Tilley and Ryan DeBell and all these guys who just kind of were students when they started off, and now they have their own amazing brands. I call them my Padawans. I told them just have regular content, do it regularly. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's easy to get out there, but it is hard to stay consistent. As you probably know, as a content creator, sometimes you think like, oh, my guest canceled, mm-hmm. or I'm just not going to do a podcast or release a video this week. Once you get into, you miss 1 or 2 weeks, it just stops. So you have to do it regularly. You have to have good quality content. And I would say don't be afraid of answering the same question over and over again, because people say, have you been doing this for so many years? And by and large, I've just repeated videos I've made before. They probably look and sound a lot better now, but even my most ardent blog followers and readers, I had a couple guys who told me, I check your blog every morning before I read my own email. They still ask me what I think are the most basic questions. The guy who told me, I read your blog every day, I share it with everyone I know, and he asked me a question that he should just absolutely know, mm-hmm. if you read my blog every day. Mm-hmm. So you assume that everyone hears 100% of all the messages you've ever delivered, and that is far from the truth. Mm-hmm. Whether it's in business or especially for those of you guys who are in healthcare, no one hears exactly 100% of what you have to say, and they have their own biases and interpretations of that. So don't be afraid to be repetitive. Don't be, if you lack a muse or you lack any kind of input for a question, just see what people are already watching and make your own version of that. Yeah. It just has to be consistent. It doesn't need to be every day like my crazy schedule is, but once a week, once every other week. It has to be regular. People have to know it's coming. And, don't be afraid. Let everyone share your stuff, and you can share other people's stuff too. Because when I first started out, I asked a lot of people who are now very, very good friends of mine, who were big, very, very big at the time, and they're still huge, if they can share my stuff, and they didn't know me from beans. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any cred. And they're like, hey, can you share my stuff? You're big. Can you help me out? Most of them said, yeah, I like your stuff, but no, I had to earn it. Yeah. That did change the way I treat other people, though, who reach out to me, who, like when you started out, mm-hmm. I always answer people back, mm-hmm. And I make sure that I answer within a reasonable amount of time so they don't think I forgot about them. And if I look at their content and I like it, I share it. Mm-hmm. Or now I stick it in my Meet Edgar queue and it just shares it for me, because I don't have as much time to share everyone's individual content. There's just too much stuff out there. But, I think the last piece of advice I have other than regular content is you have to have a reason for doing it. And it has to be more than altruistic. And it's not like I'm greedy, but, how have someone like Mike Reinhold and I have done this for so long? It's because we have products and we have seminars or we have things that we're selling. And if you're not promoting something, whether it's your business or something that you can earn a living from, it's very hard to do it altruistically,
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a lot of good points there, especially with talking about how initially you don't really need a lot of fancy equipment. As long as you hit the baseline stuff, so it's overall decent quality, you don't need to go much fancier than that, which I totally agree with, because then that's kind of what we try to do too. But especially, I agree that especially, even being repetitive with certain content, because it's sometimes too, you're right, belief and expectations, but it also depends also too on where someone's at in their life. Like if someone's like checking out our stuff, or even for patients, for example, and they're looking at our content like, oh, that's interesting, but they don't really pay too much attention, or a lot of it doesn't stick because it's not relevant to them at that time. But perhaps later, maybe some time down the road, they develop an injury or they have some pain or something like that, and it's similar to what we talked about, then they'll probably, when they see that again, like, oh, now I'm going to pay attention because now that's more relevant to me.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's ironic too, because when I started podcasting with Therapy Insiders, we would have a business guest on, and I'm just like bored out of my mind. And we just talk, one of the recurring themes was that PTs know nothing about business. We don't have formal business training like chiropractors do, and other health professions who are maybe expected. I don't know if MDs have any of it. I don't think so, not as much as chiropractors, but I mean, you just kind of expected to eventually start a business if you're entrepreneurial enough. And that's kind of crazy because we don't have any business training, and the more of these business people came on, I eventually started actually listening to their message. And I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about business. Maybe I should start to learn things about business and focus on marketing and client retention and, looking at profit and loss, and instead of just like sharing and hoping that people buy, which is kind of like my strategy. And it got me so far, but it didn't really get me where I wanted to be. Right. So yeah, I mean, that is it. It's when you're ready to hear the message, you will hear it.
Mm-hmm. No, amen to that. And so your story is unique in that everything kind of started from the blog, and then the content with manual manual therapy, and then that went into the eclectic approach. And with all the different avenues of content that can be created from video, audio, written, and then there's others, I'd kind of like to break down each one for our listeners. So the first avenue is, what are some of the important considerations and tips for creating educational video content that perhaps you hadn't mentioned before that you think is unique to video?
I would say unique to video in terms of social media. I think there's an expectation on social media, probably with the rise of Twitter, and I'm not sure if Twitter is still not expanding, and even they expanded their character content. But with that and viral videos, typically, my wife will share with me the latest viral video of the week, and I can sometimes barely make it through 10 seconds of it. And if you read my blog, when I started maybe 7 years ago, I used to have a blog. The average blog post would maybe take you 5 to 10 minutes to read, and it used to have 3 5-minute videos in it. And I just expected that everyone would absorb all of that and watch every single minute of those videos. And people have noticed, I've eventually waited for people to notice over the past couple of years, I just, knowing my own attention span, I started making it so that you can read in maybe 2 swipes. So 2 swipes up a phone screen and a video that doesn't last any more than 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes I go long if it's a Q&A and I talk 5 minutes, and I thought it was 1 or 2 minutes. I tend to be wordy if you haven't figured that out already. But I try to keep it as short and simple as possible, because let me tell you, people are not watching. When I looked at the metrics for the amount of time people spent on a page, if it should have taken you 10 minutes, it's like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and you have like a 5-minute video in there. Some people have told me they miss my long form cases, but the majority of people who have been longtime readers and watchers, they appreciate that it's short.
And do you find kind of that similar in terms like to audio, like if you're doing specific audio content, and same with written content as well, like if any other specific things with that too? Because I know definitely keeping it short and simple and sweet and to the point seems to be the biggest money from what I'm hearing.
I think so. I think the audio is different. That's why I do have like the long form kind of interview style of Therapy Insiders versus the storytelling style of Untold Physio Stories, which is kind of like designed for a commute. Right. Some people have a long commute. They have 45 minutes, or they go on for a long run. They can listen to a long form podcast. But overall, I found that I don't complete the majority of long form podcasts. Maybe I'll be driving in a car for 20 minutes, but I'm not going to go back to it. Mm-hmm. I often find myself never going back to it. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the metrics are. I haven't really looked at the completion, because I just looks at downloads or streams, right? I don't think there's a way to look at it, not like a video. So I can't say, because there's probably no research on that. Mm-hmm. But that's why I just do both. I just try to be, and I've said it on another podcast, I think might have even been my podcast, Therapy Insiders. I try to be omnipresent in all media. Mm-hmm. I try to have audio, video, Instagram. I'm starting to do stories now too on Instagram. Right. Because I have people who say they follow me on Instagram, but they don't have a blog. Mm-hmm. People who read my blog every day, and even though I share my podcast, they don't know I have a podcast. Or they say they love my podcast, and I say which one. They don't even know mm-hmm. that I have 2. Yeah. So it's almost like you can't be out there too much, because if you're like, oh yeah, my business is a YouTube channel, but you're not on Instagram, you're missing out. You think like Apple just advertises only on the radio? Mm-hmm. Right? They're everywhere. Mm-hmm. The biggest brands are everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's true. And especially thinking, I like how you're going with the Instagram route, because essentially, just for me, what I've noticed when I've done some more of my podcast marketing through Instagram, I'm definitely able to track more through the story than I am from just a regular post, because I can see how many people are viewing, and I can see who's consistently viewing. So who are the people that are mostly viewing the content? So that's definitely a huge plus. Yeah, the story tracking is much more like a typical Facebook, where you can look at all the metrics. Mm-hmm. But Instagram post for metrics is pretty much useless. Like it's really hard to look at a post and think like, oh, I should post more, this post did well, or I should boost this post. You don't get the same out of it as you do from a Facebook boosted post. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. And, I guess the big question then with kind of talking about kind of how this is, then first of all, how do you pull this off? Like kind of like in terms of like, how is your day, like what does your daily, weekly routine look like in terms of how you balance everything between doing all your content, but then also doing all your stuff with your business, but also family stuff? Like how's that balance work, if there is one? I know there's a big debate on that one, whether it exists or not. Yeah. And for me, there's absolutely a balance. And for me, it's always family first. My last name means religious, and I have a very large family. I have 5 kids and 2 dogs and 6 chickens. And I have a wife who's a PT, and we always say, or by we, I mean I, maybe you'll be a PT again if we ever stop having kids. So I think family is first for me. And when I was initially launching my brand, my wife was very, very upset at me. I mean, it was the work-life balance was not there, and it was work. When she decided not to go back to work with our third child, because otherwise she would pretty much we'd be paying for daycare, for her being a part-time home care PT. We didn't want that for our children or for her. And I just, there's nothing like risk or like a trial to make you successful. If you don't have this risk, it's really hard to push yourself. Mm-hmm. So we had this double income house that I just shouldn't have bought. I had the cheapest lease. She decided not to go back to work right as I decided to open up my own clinic. And that was rough. And I just started blogging too. I didn't even know that could be successful in any kind of way. So, that all ended up working out, but that's what drove me to be successful. Because when I was blogging 5 days a week, I was writing those super long blog posts. I would be up until past midnight, doing all my own editing. I also built all my own sites. There wasn't like easy develop, there wasn't like Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or any of those things. But I taught myself that, and it's also cheaper. I recommend using things like Blogger or Google Sites and all this stuff that's free. It's fast, easy hosting. You don't have to pay an arm and a leg or have like someone build something for you for an exorbitant price. You can pretty much do it yourself these days for a very, very cost-effective way. But the more successful I became, the more people started hosting me, the more products I started selling, the more courses I started teaching. I didn't have to see as many patients. Mm-hmm. So I see patients now a couple of days a week, not 5 days a week. So I actually have more time to produce content and more time to spend with my family. Yeah. So for me, it's always family first, because I didn't want to be the guy on the gravestone that said, "Here lies Erson. He really provided for us as a family, but we never saw him." Yeah. Like the WorkLife Balance podcast that I did on Therapy Insiders, because I like to continuously you can't self-promote enough. It ended where I basically said, you have to have a goal in mind. And once you reach this goal, it's not you shouldn't continue to strive to be better, but you have to know when to back off and stop working. And, if you're single, that's cool. Mm-hmm. But if you have a family, at some point, your family is going to miss you. They might support you, but there's no one who ever said, "Man, I just love it when dad or mom goes to work."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. And I think, at this point too, for me too, I'm kind of more in that early stage, because right now I'm just engaged. I don't have any kids and stuff. So I'm able to put more time into that. But I think what I've looked to do now is to be able to do some of these other things that I want to do from a goal standpoint, is I've started bringing other people in to help change it so that other responsibilities get done, to be able to still get the good quality out, but not necessarily sacrifice certain things. But I think for me also, I got to pick and choose my battles.
Yeah, one of the best things I ever did was bring in a modern manual therapy team. That's why I went from the manualtherapist.com to modern manual therapy blog, still on the manualtherapist.com because of SEO reasons. Andrew Rothschild, I brought in, him. He was my first team member. And then I just brought in a bunch of other people, and they already had their own blogs, but maybe they weren't as popular. So I just said, hey, you know what? You don't even need to make original content. Just let me repost. That really took a lot of workload off of me. The greatest thing is people were like, hey, Erson, you just wrote a great blog post. I'm like, thanks, but I didn't even write it. Even though it says like someone else's picture after it. Like Sean Smale, she writes amazing evidence-based blog posts with like a lot of citations afterward. And people are like, I love that blog post. I'm like, it has a picture of a girl. It says by Sean. It links to her stuff at the end, but maybe people don't read it to the end, or they just assume I write everything. So yeah, if you can delegate. But also one of the things that really helped me out and really organized my day was time blocking. So, when I heard Dr. Ryan DeBell from Move and Fix and Health Fit Biz and his buddy, Dr. Anthony Gustin, talk about time blocking, it really made a lot of sense, where you just set aside, like, I might record a podcast, I'll block it off from like 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. I might do video editing. I might do like a certain portion of the day from like 2 to 3 p.m. is purely for answering emails. Because otherwise you're just always opening up your inbox and you're just sporadically checking it. Mm-hmm. Just leave a certain portion of the day to whatever task And you'll find that the amount of deep work you really need to do to get something done is really only a couple hours. And the rest of the time you can see patients or spend time with your family. And once you're focused and you give yourself some like a checklist to check off, your workday becomes a lot more efficient rather than, oh yeah, I still have to edit this. Maybe I should shoot a video now because I don't have a video queued up for Monday. Once you structure it and you make it objective, it's a lot easier to work less.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think that that's one thing, at least for I know a few others, is that was one of those sometimes easier said than done. But I think that's something that definitely is a good thing. And do you use any things to help do like a journal or anything like that? Or do you just kind of...
I do not like paper. I like the Daily Domination Journal. I like the concept of journaling. But everything I do is on Google. I am a huge Google fan. Even though I went to iOS, I use all Google apps. I use Google Keep for a checklist. If I have to write something, I might use my stylus, but I don't draw diagrams and stuff. I'm very much an auditory learner, so I'm not one of those people who draws all kinds of algorithms and charts to help me flesh out an idea. For me, if I get an idea in the middle of the night, I take it down on my phone. It doesn't, I realize that it may absolutely help other people to journal. I'm not one of those people. But I like the concept of journaling, and I prescribe that to patients too. Like, you should practice write down 3 things. But whether you write them down, whether you mentally say them, or whether you type them in your phone, I think you should do these things in a systematic way, but it might not be physically with writing and killing trees.
Right. Just some method of having record that kind of works best for you based on your preferences and what works best for you.
I think journaling works so well because it's a routine. And it's a routine of particularly positive things that makes whatever goal setting you have a bit more objective, rather than I want to make more money, or I should make more videos, or I need so many new likes a week or something. All this, it just helps it be objective.
Oh yeah. And I think that's so huge because even for me, like I've used a journal for clinical development, and sometimes I will notice if I'm going through a period where I'm like, what's going on? Like, why am I feeling like I'm hitting a low point? I'll go back and I'll always look and I'll be like, what are some of the habits that I'm doing? If there's any discrepancy there. But it's amazing when you start to actually look at what you write, you're like, maybe it's just a better way to objectively see kind of where you think your deficits lie. So I think that's a really good point. So what are you looking to add to modern manual therapy? And can you tell us what the plan is for it kind of within the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I wanted to branch out because I remember someone told me a couple years ago, you just can't keep on doing this all by yourself. And I do have the team for the blog, but the eclectic approach, modern manual therapy is a sub-brand of that. And then I just recently added modern strength training, which is BFR based. We have our own certificate. That's Dr. Kyle Coffey, Dr. Andrew Rothschild, who again, my first trusted team member. He is developing modern patient education, which is pain science-based, recovery, sleep, nutrition, all the things that a patient needs to empower themselves, which I think that we learn all the stuff about pain science and nutrition and kind of stuff in bits and pieces, but no way to put it together. So we wanted to kind of make pain science and patient education a bit more systematic and easier to relate to a patient, rather than throwing all this information and statistics and citations at you and you have to synthesize all your stuff. Modern motor controls with the motion guidance guys, and modern corporate wellness is with Andy McLarkley, who's getting to be very successful in the corporate wellness world. So that is where modern manual therapy is going, more the eclectic approach is branching off. I'm going to handle the modern manual therapy part, but there's going to be 4 other distinct courses under the eclectic approach with the modern branding.
Nice. So kind of getting in now that kind of is a nice, perfect transition, kind of more the continuing education realm. A question for you is, how do you come up with the best marketing plan for your courses that is most affordable?
I'm always learning with that. And again, I tend to focus a lot more of my marketing and promotion on my products because that's what people are buying more than my seminars. But I just had an experiment. My course had sold out just last month at Recharge, where my UpDoc Media founder and co-host, Dr. Gene Chiracabroad, he said, hey, you know what? For the Black Friday sale, why don't you just say we only have 10 tickets available? Like the whole scarcity mindset. So I said, hey, 10 tickets available for 2 days only, from Friday to Cyber Monday, and they all 10 sold. And that, it's all that whole scarcity mindset, plus in the psychology of this is sale time, I got to jump on this. I never thought to do that for a seminar. People typically do super early bird, whatever, but they don't limit the amount of tickets at that price. So I was like, wow, the same thing that I do for like an edge tool, for a 2-day sale, I never thought to do for a ticket. And I think people don't look at those things in the way that they don't promote their courses in the way that other businesses have promoted their products. Like, is the course a product? Is it a ticket? Is it a physical ticket that can be limited? No, it's just like, hey, we have 30 spots. Maybe the spots are limited by the amount of space the clinic has, the amount of seats or tables you have, but it's not limited by, like, you want to sell. I mean, and it worked really well. So now I'm kind of doing that for all my courses. And, I sell better than I have been in the past. So it's kind of like all these tickets are the same price.
And I think that's actually a really good take, because I could definitely see, as a buyer perspective, I know there's always a course you have in mind, but then when you see that deal come through that's only going to last, you definitely have more of an impulse to make that jump right then and there.
If you think like you're going to miss out, and I think like also the way that I word the copy or the copyright on my pages, like, fancy taglines. You want to make someone feel like they're missing out or feel like whatever they're paying for is of a value. Not like you're going to learn spinal manipulation, cervical manipulation, all this stuff. I don't say that. I might say that's what you learn, but I would say things like, we don't replace your system. We enhance whatever system you have. Manual therapy can be easy. Are you tired of learning 300 techniques and not knowing what to do on Monday? Versus we give you an easy systematic approach that you can apply immediately without replacing everything that you already know. There's a difference between the way you word things, and those are all the things that I've kind of started changing all the copy on my pages and trying to look what other businesses are doing, how they're successful, and just kind of play on the psychology of a sale. Because everyone's in the business of sales, whether you like to or not. If you want to be, it doesn't matter whether you're in healthcare only, even if you don't own your own practice, if you are not like Disney, like Ben Fung always talks about Disney. Ben Fung, one of my other founders of Buckdock Media, he actually has business training as a PT, and he loves studying Disney, because if you go to Disney, every single one of their employees is on board with a consistent experience of amazing for the consumer. Versus like if you have like a crappy receptionist, the first point of contact is what that patient sees or what that consumer sees. And it's got to be consistent. It's got to make someone feel like they would now be your evangelist, and they will tell everyone about it, because word of mouth is so much better.
No, totally agree. And that always reminds me of Jerry Durham too, with his classic take on the patient experience. That's huge. And, we got 2 more questions here. And, the second to last one is, what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned about teaching clinical continuing education that since you started teaching?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is I really try to what we're doing is we're trying to change clinician behavior, right? Certainly you're there to learn facts, but in the end, if you're trying to make something systematic, you're trying to change the behavior in a practice, just like you would try to change a patient's behavior with a home exercise program, like avoid doing this, do this, and you'll get better, right? So I really thought that, again, all my most dedicated blog readers are absorbing 100% of my message. And now, again, I've been teaching Con Ed. I've been practicing 20 years, teaching Con Ed 19 years, and teaching all over the place for a good maybe 7 years. And my goal is to, honestly, in a group of 30, like this class is, of course, unique. You're in it, right? A lot of great people, blog readers are in it. But honestly, my goal is to change the behavior of 2 people. Really, really reach 2 people. And maybe the average kind of clinician will go back and have tips and tricks on how to make things kind of pain-free, and maybe apply compression band wrapping for neurodynamics, which I never thought of before. But the majority of people don't get 100% of your concepts without repetition. Like, you can't just be a mastery at anything over a weekend course. I mean, that's why mentoring is important, or basically repetitive exposure, but it's that mentoring and feedback. But honestly, I mean, there's always 2 or 3 people, or a small percentage of the course, who will really get it, or someone who's asking amazing questions. Then just in contrast, there's like, I think everyone's reaching me, and it's happened so many times. I realized I can't say how many times I said, you can't break up fascia, manual therapy is neurophysiologic, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, 1 hour before the course is over, someone talks to me about breaking up scar tissue. And I'm thinking like, did you just walk in right now? So you can't reach everyone, and I think that if you get slammed on feedback, that's great. Like, realize that you can't please everyone too. There are going to be people who hated the course. You can come at that from a constructive standpoint, and some people are just going to be flat out mean, and don't take it personally. But that's basically what I've learned from doing this for so long, is that don't try to change everyone.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think you have to even find, like, you got to find that individual who actually wants that change. It's just, to me, I think for me, it's going to be more of a just discipline, doing more stuff, experimenting, failing, learning, and the whole 9 yards. But, our last question that we like to always ask is this. We always ask this to each of our guests. We're so curious to hear what everyone's thoughts are. And the question is, if you could change one aspect of healthcare education, and whether that be DPT or whatever, or other healthcare provider related, what aspect would you change, and how would you change it?
I definitely want there to be more emphasis on pain science in the curriculum and less emphasis on pathoanatomy. That is a huge thing. But I'd also have to say, and this is an identified weakness, especially by evidence in motion, because I talk about it a lot, is it doesn't matter if 100% of every single physical therapy curriculum was on board with a great pain science empowering the patient message, and they 100% moved away from pathoanatomy and useless provocative special tests. If the majority, and I don't even know if it's the majority, I feel like it is, but maybe sometimes we're just surrounded by bad clinicals, it's clinical education. People think it's the schools, and certainly not every faculty member is amazing, and there's a bell curve in everything, so not everyone can be amazing. Not everyone is to the right of the curve. But it doesn't matter if every single professor is the best professor in the world, if every clinical has high volume pathoanatomical clinicians who could give a crap about quality patient care. The thing is, everyone thinks they're doing a great job. No one really thinks they're doing a bad job. You almost have to be like a psychopath to think, like, I just phone it in every day and I don't care. I guess there's some people who are like that. But the majority of people, when you interview them, like the laziest teenager who just gives you the crappiest service at your local coffee shop, they think they're doing a pretty okay job. Maybe they think this isn't their intended job. But yeah, that's the thing. And I think that what really needs to change is clinical education. And I don't know how that could change. Like, I've been out almost 20 years, and high volume clinics aren't decreasing. I don't know if they're increasing. And great, it's awesome that there's all these concierge-based practices and cash-based practices, and a lot of focus on one-on-one and quality. And you don't even have to have one-on-one. It just needs to be quality. So it's tough, because you might have, again, the best professors in the world, but if all of your clinical internships are bad and you end up being hired by one of these places, with the intention of, I'll eventually move on to a better job, but that better job might never come. And that's why I think it's a slow to no change.
And it's hard especially because a lot of schools, a lot of them don't necessarily have the luxury of, I can only want to put all these students in these certain spots. There's too many students.
There's not enough clinicals. Yeah. I don't know what the solution to that is, honestly. Pitt has a very novel solution where they have only like approved clinics where all their students go for like a 6-month residency at the end of their DPT. Yeah. That's like controlled. Mm-hmm. But that's because Pitt is an unusual university and its own healthcare system and its own HMO, which is really weird. Yeah. That's almost like a monopoly in some ways. Mm-hmm. But not too many universities have that control where they can control all of those aspects. So, I hope, 20 years now, I'm always reflecting what has changed. I think there's a lot of different avenues for PTs to monetize themselves and to practice and really get out there. But in terms of clinical education, I don't know how much has changed, honestly.
No, I agree overall. And I think I at least like now overall what some of the boards and stuff are trying to do by examining this problem, seeing what needs to be done. So I think there's definitely some work that they're trying to find the right way to do it, of course. So again, thanks, Erson, for coming on. It's been a great pleasure absolutely having you, and love having you teaching here. Just as a last thing, where can people find you online on social media to find you?
Well, hey, it's Dr. E with Modern Manual Therapy. Why don't you subscribe to our email so you don't miss any of our awesome blog updates. Modern Manual Therapy Premium is my premium site. I didn't mention that, but I do have a subscription site where I have long form videos, because people who pay, they don't want to watch a 1 minute, 2 minute YouTube video. So We have research reviews on there. Modern Manual Therapy for free is on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Follow us on any of those, your platform of choice. 2 podcasts through UpDoc Media, Therapy Insiders for long form, Untold Physio Stories, where we talk about physio failures. We could subtitle it the Physio Failures Podcast. Edge Mobility Systems, where I have all of my ISTM, BFR, strength products, webinars, ebooks. We're always expanding and looking for more products. If you're an entrepreneur and you thinking about a product or you sell a product, hit me up and maybe I'll sell it for you and get you more exposure. So those are all the ways I can think of right now. I have lots of different brands that I all do myself.
Very cool. And we will post all those links kind of in the show notes, guys, for you guys that are interested to check it out. But in the meantime, thanks so much, Erson. Always a pleasure. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.